Hello and welcome back to the Second and Short College Football Show. It is now week 4 of the college football season, almost a third of the way through most teams' games, and there's a lot to look forward to. Tons of big news in college football has gone down this week. We've got a couple of really good matchups, maybe some underrated matchups as well to look forward to. If you like what you've seen or you're seeing this for the first time, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment here on YouTube. When you subscribe, make sure you turn on those post notifications to make sure you see every single time these videos go up, as well as anything else we're making over here on the Second and Short channel. On top of that, make sure you're watching the podcast Mondays and Fridays on YouTube, as well as anywhere that you get your podcasts. And of course, follow us on all of our social media accounts. Instagram's one where we're most active, as well join the Second and Short subreddit, r/2ND Short. If you didn't see our first episode last week, this is the way the show goes. First, we're going to go through some of the biggest headlines across college football. Then we will get into my top 10 going into week 4. Then it will be the top matchups this week. We'll talk through some of those games. We'll also talk about some of the underrated matchups, maybe some that aren't quite on your radar to watch. We'll finish it out by me giving off 3 picks. Of course, if you want to see us do anything else with these episodes, this is a brand new series that I'm trying out, so please let us know, either down in the comments, shoot us a DM on Instagram, leave a post on our Reddit page, whatever you'd like to let us know what you'd like to see on this show. All right, let's get this thing on the road, and we're going to start with the headliners. First, the biggest news is coming out of the Pac-12. This one actually broke the day that we dropped the first episode of the College Football Show, so of course it was not in that episode, so we'll talk about it now. The Pac-12 has raided the Mountain West. They will add Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State in 2026. Those 4 that they're taking will be joining the already existing members in Washington State and Oregon State, but the biggest problem that the Pac-12 faces here is that they still need 2 more teams to be recognized as a FBS conference by the NCAA. They will need these 2 teams by that 2026 season during this 2-year grace period they were given after being raided and losing 10 teams last year. And because they have 2 more spots to fill, it sparked some rumors of some other teams coming in, potentially bringing back Cal and Stanford, maybe going after some FCS powerhouses like North Dakota State, maybe South Dakota State or Montana. A couple of those teams have been in the conversations. I'm interested to see what the Pac-12 does, but don't think that this brings them back to prominence. This will not be a Power 5 conference just because they added some teams. There is still only a Power 4. Yes, these teams, once they are a conference that is recognized by the NCAA, will be able to contend for those top 4 seeds in the playoff because they are a conference and the highest ranked conference winners can occupy one of those seeds. But I don't see a world where the winner of this conference is ranked that high. Yes, it can happen. There could be a year where probably the ACC out of all of them would have the lowest ranked conference champion, but these teams don't seem all that competitive on the national standpoint. Maybe they could compete within the Pac-12, but I don't see any of them taking up one of those guaranteed spots, so they're going to have to get an at-large bid. Now, this could add them to the fold of the group of 5 bid. I don't know how that's going to work either, because you could say that Washington State and Oregon State are a little bit too high caliber of programs and of teams to compete for that bid, and maybe they would get it too often. So I'm interested to see how the College Football Playoff Committee and how the NCAA is going to handle this whole situation. Now to our next biggest thing in college football. It's just Texas in general. They had a hell of a week last week, but Quinn Ewers went down with an injury early in the game against UTSA. He was then replaced by Arch Manning. Now it looks like Quinn Ewers is going to be week to week, and Arch Manning is likely to start their next game against Louisiana Monroe. Texas also jumped up to number 1 in the AP poll after last week's performance, so at the moment, Texas is on top of the world, but this QB situation could get tricky, at least to the general population. It's very obvious that once Quinn Ewers is healthy, he will be the starting quarterback. He hasn't had any reason why he shouldn't be the starting quarterback as of now, but people are just enamored by the Manning name. And Arch's performance last week against UTSA was unbelievable, but you have to remember seniority does play into account here. Quinn Ewers hasn't played bad. He's not been like Davis Warren, who's been benched in Michigan. It's not quite like that situation. Quinn Ewers is a Heisman contender at quarterback, but Arch Manning definitely is talented, but Arch has to know that his spot is backup, and I think he's aware of that. It just comes down to the general population and the media not trying to exploit this fantastic performance and try and turn it into a benching Quinn Ewers movement. On to our next topic. Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi was fined and reprimanded publicly by the ACC for his post-game press conference after their win over West Virginia, where he was criticizing the officials for how the game was called. We talked about it last week, but the backyard brawl is a fierce rivalry, and to see this game go the way it went was an amazing game to watch down the stretch. But what Pat Narduzzi wasn't happy with was the amount of penalties called on his team. Pitt was called for 12 penalties for a total of 112 yards. That is game-changing for this team and put them in a position where they had to mount a huge comeback going into the end of the game and somehow pull out with a win. Pat Narduzzi said in his press conference, "We beat West Virginia in the backyard brawl, and we beat the officials in the same game." I don't think this comment's all that bad. I know that you can't just let head coaches publicly criticize referees, but in this case, it wasn't great. I saw some of the game. Some of the calls were a little bit questionable. And yes, it made for good football. It made for a good entertainment value. But I understand Pat Narduzzi's anger, and $5,000 probably won't set him back too much. Now to our next thing, which I kind of mentioned in Texas's news, but Davis Warren has been benched by Michigan. So last week, after he went 11-14 and his 3 incompletions were interceptions, he got benched for Alex Orji. Well, now Alex Orji will be starting this week against USC for Michigan. Going into this season, I think most people probably thought that Alex Orji was going to win the starting spot. All of a sudden, Davis Warren is announced as the starter only a couple days before their season opener. It caught everybody by surprise, and now I can say nobody was surprised that he got benched this early in the season. After seeing how Michigan has struggled these last couple of weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what Alex Orji is walking into with USC coming to Ann Arbor this weekend. Stay tuned for a little more conversation on that matchup, but let's get into our last headline. This week, there's been a lot of conversation about Billy Napier and his job security in Gainesville. We already talked last week in this segment about them deciding that Lagway and Mertz would get usage in the offense. That didn't work. They got beat up by Texas A&M. The offense looked pretty flat. So, naturally, the Florida fans were booing Billy Napier, and rightfully so. The problem is, booing your head coach doesn't get him fired, and it's going to take a whole lot more than that for them to pay his buyout, because as of right now, the University of Florida, if they were to fire him this year, would owe him $26.7 million. And if he's fired at any point, they owe him 50% of that money within 30 days of the termination. So if they fire him mid-season, they would have to cough up a little bit more than $13 million within 30 days just to get him off their hands, and then they have to go out and find a new head coach. I don't think they're in the position to do this. I don't think they want to do this necessarily, but Billy Napier has been unbelievably bad, and all you're going to do is hurt yourselves by keeping a bad head coach at a losing program. And we all knew coming into this season that Billy Napier was on probably the hottest seat in the SEC and maybe even the hottest seat in college football. I didn't think they would turn this quickly, but we all knew that Florida had a tough schedule. If they started off the season like this, just imagine what those last 6 games are going to look like for them. All right, that's all the news we've got for this week. Now, let's talk about my top 10. Once again, I feel bad that near the top, I kind of sympathize with the AP poll. I'm not a huge fan of the AP poll. I'm less of a fan of the College Football Playoff Committee. Up near the top, I still think they're kind of getting it right. At number 1, Texas leapfrogs right over Georgia and takes the number 1 spot, and rightfully so. Georgia just won 13-12 over a Kentucky team that got blown out of the water by South Carolina. It made sense for Georgia to drop a spot. Ohio State was on a bye week. They stay at number 3. Alabama and Ole Miss stay at number 4 and 5. Tennessee, in another dominant victory, goes up to number 6. Then at number 7, I've got the University of Miami after another outstanding performance from Cam Ward in a big victory against Ball State. Then I unfortunately do have Mizzou dropping 2 spots despite playing a ranked opponent. It was a close game. It shouldn't have been that close against Boston College, so Mizzou drops down to number 8 for me from 6 last week. Then at number 9, I've got Oregon. They jump up 1 spot in my rankings because it was a pretty good showing. This was kind of the turning point against Oregon State. That's what I was looking for from them. Unfortunately, I picked Oregon State to cover the spread last week just because I wasn't sure Oregon would make the proper adjustments. It seems like Dan Lanning's got his guys together and really turned something around, and this is the right time to do it. So A big move by Oregon to come out and make a statement against their rival. And then rounding out my top 10, I've got the USC Trojans. They were on a bye week, so it kind of hurts them a little bit, but they still get to hold on to the number 10 spot and stay within my top 10. I've got Kansas State at number 11, no matter what, just outside the top 10. I would typically say these are in no particular order. Kansas State is number 11. What they showed against Arizona last week was phenomenal. Yes, Teteroa McMillan went crazy, but they were able to do things on the other side of the ball. The defense was fine. They slowed down Arizona in most facets that you could. It's hard to stop Teteroa McMillan, but you stopped everything else. And then on your offensive side, I was looking for something to prove from Avery Johnson last week. That's exactly what he came out and did by rushing for over 100 yards and throwing over 150 yards. The other two teams I've got right outside the top 10, Penn State and Utah. Penn State coming off a bye week, Utah coming off a close victory over Utah State, but you were missing Cam Rising, so it kind of evens itself out. So those two stay there right outside the top 10 as well. All right, now it's time for our top matchups of the week, and we start off on Friday night once again. Last week, it was that big matchup between Arizona and Kansas State. This week, we've got a Big Ten matchup on Friday night on Fox. We've got number 24 Illinois going on the road to number 22 Nebraska. Right now, as the line sits, Nebraska is a 9.5-point favorite, and the biggest thing for me is what will Jackson Mahomes, Dylan Raiola show off on Friday night. Raiola has looked very good, but I wouldn't say that he's had these huge game-changing moments. He hasn't had a Heisman moment or anything like that. He's just looked good and got Nebraska a couple of wins. This is a game where you can start to prove something. Illinois is not a team you can just easily look over. I think the win against Kansas kind of looked good, but that's kind of where all their hype's coming from, and now Kansas is 1-2, maybe not the start we anticipated from them. So Illinois' win now in retrospect doesn't look quite as good. We'll have to see how that pans out. But Nebraska is kind of the same way. They've played nobodies in their last game and their first game, but they had the win over Colorado that got them quite a bit of attention. Really, the biggest thing why this is one of the top matchups for me this week is that I'm just excited to see what we get from both sides. Obviously, Nebraska is a 9.5-point favorite, and I do think they're the better team, especially on offense. I think they're a much better offense than what Illinois has to offer, so I'm going to go with Nebraska to win. I don't know if they'll cover 9.5, though. Our next matchup is probably what I would consider the game of the week. Number 11 USC Trojans are road favorites in Ann Arbor versus number 18 Michigan. I feel like what USC has done in their first two games, now they're coming off of a bye, has been incredible. I was expecting it. I wanted Miller Moss to look good. I think the defense has looked much better. We've already talked about the huge improvements they've made on both sides, but coming off of, you had Caleb Williams on the offense and this electric era of offense with him, and also one of the worst defensive teams we've seen in a long time. So I think now they've evened everything out. Yes, maybe the offense isn't quite as electric with Miller Moss at quarterback. They've still looked good. The defense is just improved tenfold compared to where they were at last year. And like I said, I'm high on Miller Moss. And on the other side, I couldn't be lower on Michigan. You're coming off of horrible showings in your first three games. Yes, I know you won two of them, but they were still bad showings. Now you're making a QB change early in the season. I knew what to expect out of Davis Warren, which was bad quarterback play. I don't exactly know what I'm expecting out of Alex Orji just yet. Now, all he has to do is not throw 3 interceptions, and he'll look better than Davis Warren, but you got to show me something before I even think of siding with you. So as of right now, I think USC is the no-brainer, especially when you consider they're going on the road to Ann Arbor, which seems like it'd be a tough matchup, but Texas went in there, manhandled Michigan, and went home with a huge win to start the season. Now they're the number 1 team in the nation. USC needs to come in and capitalize and try and jump forward in the rankings with a big victory here. And as well, this is USC's first game in Big Ten play. This is a very important game for them, a huge conference game, and just a huge game for the program that has now found themselves in the Big Ten. So obviously, I'm going to be going with the USC Trojans in this matchup. Now on to another road favorite in a ranked matchup. Number 12 Utah, a 2-point favorite, going on the road to take on the number 14 Oklahoma State Cowboys. I don't exactly know how I feel about this game just yet. Both of these teams have kind of showed up, kind of not in some games. It's been really tricky to get a grasp on what these two teams have to offer going forward. I'm definitely more confident in Kyle Whittingham as a head coach, but Mike Gundy has certainly coached himself into some impressive victories. I think with both sides, you're going to see some pretty good, talented players on offense, talented players on defense. I think where the real thing that changes my mind potentially here is that Cam Rising is starting. That definitely boosts my confidence. He looked really good in the first game that they played. He looked good in that first half against Baylor. Then he got hurt, came out of the game. We haven't seen him in a game and a half now. I'm excited to see what Cam Rising's got for us, and Utah definitely needs him to propel this offense forward. On Oklahoma State's side, it's been fantastic to watch what Alan Bowman has done this season. The only problem is that Ollie Gordon has looked unbelievably bad compared to the expectations we had. I came into this season saying that he was a number one running back in the nation. Yes, I knew Ashton Jeanty was very good. I thought he was number two. It's very clear to me now Ollie Gordon has dropped down the list significantly. He had a decent opening game to the season, but in his last two games, he hasn't surpassed 50 yards, and in both games, he's had 17 carries. He's averaging almost 2.7 yards per carry, and that's just not what we've come to expect from Ollie Gordon, and it's not what you're looking for a guy who came into the season as one of the top running backs in the nation and made this team what they are. Nobody really had these high expectations for what Alan Bowman could bring to this team. It was really all about Ollie Gordon, and now Alan Bowman has picked up the slack, but you still expect results from one of the best running backs in the country. We've seen Bowman look good. He really turned it up in the second half against Arkansas in that comeback overtime victory, and then you saw him absolutely put the beats on Tulsa last week. I like what I've seen from Alan Bowman. I just don't know how much that will do against one of the top teams in this conference. And we're likely to see this matchup again in the Big 12 championship game. So this game could be the tell of how strong these two teams are when it comes down to it near the end of the season. With Cam Rising returning, that takes a ton of pressure off Micah Bernard, who is good when he's not being forced to do everything. So personally, I'm going to take Utah here. I do think it's going to be a really close game. I think 2 points is a very good spread here. I don't know if Utah is going to cover. I'd probably keep my money away from this game just because of how close it is and how weird these two teams have been. We haven't seen perfect displays from either of these teams just yet. All right, our final matchup here for the top matchups of the week, and we've got number 6, Tennessee, another road favorite, heading to Norman and taking on number 15, Oklahoma. Tennessee is a touchdown favorite in this game, -7 at the moment, and this is the time for Tennessee to prove something. They have been beating the brakes off of all the teams they've faced this season, and Nico Iamaleava looks amazing. But now you got to show up. This is the kind of game you show up for. You showed up for NC State, and you embarrassed them. Now do it to Oklahoma if you want to be taken seriously. And I've talked about this on the podcast a couple of times. Tennessee doesn't want to leave this up to anybody else, and they certainly know that they can't ease off the gas. They did it in 2022. After that loss to Georgia, everything just fell apart. They were number 1 in the rankings and all this stuff. They run into Georgia, they get beat, and then the wheels fell off. Obviously, there was the injury to Hendon Hooker, but still, the wheels fell off for Tennessee back in 2022, and Josh Heupel is not going to have that happen again. That's why they're out here embarrassing teams week after week. And honestly, a strong victory here because you're going up against a pretty high-ranked opponent and an SEC opponent could propel you over Ole Miss if Ole Miss doesn't handedly beat Georgia Southern this week. And on the Oklahoma side, I really haven't been impressed all that much this year. And these close games in the last 2 weeks with Houston and Tulane certainly don't help that case. I think we saw a lot of reasons why this offense isn't successful and why this defense isn't exactly high caliber. And if I were Brent Venables, with what I've seen from my team the last 2 weeks, I would be really nervous heading into this game. This is your first game of SEC play. You're going up against maybe the worst team to go up against right now in the SEC. Yes, Mizzou coming off of a close one, maybe they would want some get back. If it were some of the other top teams, if this were a Texas or Georgia or Alabama, they would just get steamrolled and it would be whatever. But because you're going up against maybe the hungriest team right now in the SEC with Tennessee, it just makes things all that much worse because they're going into this game and it's not about they want to beat you. They want to embarrass you. And Brent Venables has been a shaky head coach his entire time in Oklahoma, so I have to see them do something if they want any bit of remorse from me. The offensive woes have been there for Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold has not shown up at all. I don't think he's even surpassed 175 passing yards yet in a game. And with Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State, which I guess if you wait long enough, he might be your offensive coordinator by the end of the season. You might be able to figure something out here, but I have not liked the offense since Lebby left. So I got to go with Tennessee, and I think it might be a blowout. Final point here for Tennessee's side. They are outgaining opponents by 478.6 yards per game. Meanwhile, Oklahoma hasn't even hit 400 yards in a game yet. So once again, I'm going Tennessee's way. I think it'll probably be a blowout, but we'll talk about that in the picks section. Before we get to the picks, though, we got to talk about the ones to watch this week. My first underrated game to watch is an SEC matchup down probably near the bottom of the rankings for the SEC as of right now. It's Arkansas going on the road to Auburn. Auburn only a field goal favorite at home. I think this is one certainly to watch. Maybe not for the best reasons. I think this is just a gritty matchup. This is going to be a who wants it more kind of matchup. Arkansas has fought tooth and nail with some teams to get to this point and look relatively decent heading into this game versus Auburn. And Auburn has certainly slipped up at times already, but they've also been able to show us some good stuff here and there. So I do kind of like this matchup, and also if you watch the podcast on Monday, me and Colin have been doing these beer bets is what we're calling them, where we randomly pick some games, and it's just kind of a pick 'em thing that we're doing. So this is one of our beer bets this week. I'm interested to see how it goes. It could be Arkansas, it could be Auburn. I'm interested to see how they match up when they're actually on the field. Our next game, Arizona State going on the road to Lubbock, taking on Texas Tech. Texas Tech a 3-point favorite in this game, and I kind of agree that should be the line. Once again, a field goal favorite at home. That's pretty standard for most teams as long as you're a pretty evenly matched matchup. And I got to be honest, this is also kind of a pity pick. Texas Tech got me last week. They really did. I got fooled by some North Texas propaganda that I fell for, and I thought North Texas had a chance. They got blown out of the water. I think it was 66-21. I'm not going to fall for it again. I think Texas Tech is for real, at least on the offensive side of the ball. You're going to see some points in this game for sure. Meanwhile, Arkansas State, on the other hand, has been just kind of skating by, but they're playing some pretty solid teams that they are skating by. So we'll have to see what Arizona State can do, but I just think this is going to be an entertaining matchup to watch in the Big 12. Final underrated matchup of the week, we go down to the group of 5. I've got a really good one here. Toledo, a 2.5-point favorite on the road, going to face the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. Last week, and you might not have even known this happened, Toledo waltzed in to Starkville and beat the brakes off of Mississippi State. But Western Kentucky is not exactly a team to just look right past coming off that victory. The fact that Toledo only has 2.5 points after going on the road to an SEC opponent and wiping them is a pretty big testament to how good Western Kentucky really is. Yeah, they got beat up by Alabama. Duh. Of course that was going to happen. But I've really liked what I've seen from them bouncing back from it. And I've especially liked what I saw out of Caden Veltman last week in their game against Middle Tennessee State. They were on the road at Middle Tennessee State, and Veltman went nuclear. 27 for 30, 398 passing yards, and 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. This guy went nuts. So I'm super excited. We just saw Toledo put up a bunch of points. We just saw Western Kentucky put up a bunch of points. I'm excited to see these two go head-to-head at Western Kentucky this week in those 7 o'clock games. It'll be a fun one to maybe watch the first quarter before the Tennessee game starts up, and then maybe throw it in the multi-view while you're watching. On to our closing segment of the show. I've got some picks for you. We only go game markets just because the prop markets haven't opened up yet because I record these on Tuesdays. Reminder, I am 2-1 thus far through 1 week. Alabama minus 14.5 last week. That one hit. Oregon State, unfortunately, did not cover 16.5. And then Texas A&M minus 4 against Florida was a big winner. So this week, pay attention. Reminder, this is not gambling advice. I'm not telling you to pick these picks. These are personally just the ones that I like. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And we'll start with what I said was the biggest matchup of the week. I think it's the best bet of the week, in my opinion. It is USC USC minus 5.5. Even if this goes as far as USC minus 7 by the time this game starts, I would still take USC. I think they're going to win. I think this matchup just favors them so much. They're high. They're coming off of a bye week. Michigan is low. They're coming off of a stinker against Arkansas State. I'm definitely going for USC. I think 5.5 is generous for them. Biggest thing is that Michigan scores majority of their points in the second and fourth quarter. So does USC. They also score most of their points in the second and fourth quarter. That's when most teams score most of their points. So Michigan not doing anything different from anybody else, but USC obviously outscoring opponents much better than Michigan is, even only through 2 games. And you might say that, yes, Michigan has gotten some late points in a lot of games. They're capitalizing on the fourth quarter. Well, USC's only given up 3 points in the fourth quarter across their 2 games. They haven't given up any points in the first quarter. I think USC is primed to kind of pull away with it early in that first half, come out in the third, maybe look fine, maybe get some points in there, and then really come out on defense and get some stops against Michigan in the fourth quarter and hold on. I'm thinking this might be a 2-touchdown victory, but I'm confident in saying USC minus 5.5. The next one is another one of those road favorites we already talked about. It's Tennessee minus 7. Tell me why not. Why should I not go for this? And maybe, look, Vegas knows more than me. They've beat me before. They'll beat me again. I just think this is a no-brainer in my eyes. Oklahoma has a weak offense that we've already seen. Tennessee has one of the best offenses in the country. They've got an extremely solid defense that's only allowed 13 points in 3 games. As well as that, Oklahoma's been unbelievably bad in third quarters. So what I'm expecting personally is Tennessee to quietly pull away with it in the first half and then really stick it to them coming out of the half and finish this game maybe in a blowout victory again for Tennessee. So I'm thinking Tennessee wins by 2 touchdowns or more, but I'm going to go with that Tennessee minus 7. Feel free to adjust the line if you care to. And my final pick, I'm not happy to say it, but last week I didn't do it in the picks section. I did it in the top matchup section. I picked against Florida State, and I picked against them in me and Colin's beer bets. And I was right. Memphis beat Florida State. So tell me why Cal can't cover a 2-point deficit with Florida State. Tell me why Florida State is favored at all in this matchup. Cal has at least gone and beat opponents. I think they went on the road and beat Auburn. Cal deserves some more credit than what they're giving him right now, and Florida State deserves no credit. I honestly would probably just take Cal moneyline while we're at it, because I don't see this being a 1-point game, and a 2-point game is a push. You might as well take Cal moneyline here. So that's what I'm going to change the pick to. I'm changing the pick, not +2. We're taking Cal money line here. They are going to beat Florida State because Florida State will not make changes. And it pains me to say, you see the Florida State right next to me. Last week I was wearing my Florida State hat. I'm a lifelong Seminole. There's a Florida State Coke bottle right here. I hate saying this, but I'm here to give you picks. And I'm here to go with what my gut says is right. And unfortunately, I think Cal's going to win this game. So put Cal money line on the sheet. All right, guys, that's going to do it here for the second and short college football. Week 4, extremely fun, very top-heavy matchups for sure, but we've got a lot of college football to watch. Make sure you enjoy the college football. And before you leave here, make sure you like and subscribe here on YouTube. Turn on those post notifications once you've subscribed. And then, of course, leave a comment. How about this week you're going to comment score predictions for Tennessee, Oklahoma. That's what I want to see. I want to see final score predictions. If anybody gets it right in the comments section, you're getting a shout out. With that being said, make sure you follow the Instagram. Keep you up to date with everything. Come back next week, Thursday, 3 p.m., as per usual, for another episode of the College Football Show. Make sure you listen to the podcast on Mondays and Fridays. Those come out early in the morning so you can see it all day. And, of course, make sure you join the Second and Short subreddit, r/2ND, A&D short. If you guys want to put some college football questions on the Reddit, feel free and just say that it's a college football question. And if you post it before, Tuesday midday, I'll go through the college football questions on there and answer them here on the Second and Short College Football Show. Now that you've got everything, I will leave you guys to it. There is a lot of football to enjoy, so make sure you go watch it. And we'll catch you back here next week for another episode of the Second and Short College Football Show. Thanks for the support. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys later. Peace.